Welcome to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Kieft in the studios of our flagship stations, 89.3 Lakes FM and Civic Center TV on Comcast, Channel 15 and AT&T Channel 99. Where you can also find us in the Birmingham-Bloomfield area, on Birmingham Area Municipal Access, and on City Cable 15 of Southfield. Join us live on Channel 10 in Waterford every day on the Media Network of Waterford and live to tape on Channel 10 in Orion Township and Lake Orion on Orion Neighborhood Television, or as the cool kids call it, ONTV. You can also find us on the radio in the Birmingham, Bloomfield, and Troy areas on the Biff Radio Network, 88.1 FM, the Biff, a service of the Bloomfield Hills School District. Find us online on our Facebook pages at Civic Center TV 15 and at Lakes FM, on our website at civiccentertv.com, and beginning at 11 o'clock for the Michigan Megacast on My Michigan TV or MyMy at mymytv.com, where you can also learn more about downloading both their free smart TV and smartphone apps as well. All that information is on our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast, where you can also find all of our programs on demand, as well as each interview as well. Now, usually on our coronavirus page, also at civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, we have articles each and every day. We'll get to that. First, I want to take you to the top of the page for the most up-to-date information on COVID-19 from reliable expert resources at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and the Oakland County Health Division, so that you can stay up to date on everything that you need to know about COVID-19, including the spread of the virus, precautionary tactics that you should be employing in your daily life, such as social distancing or masking or other precautions, as well as vaccinations and booster shots. Now, usually, also on our coronavirus page, we feature articles from many journalistic outlets throughout the state of Michigan in order to keep you updated on COVID-19 and other stories making headlines across the state of Michigan. Today, once again, having some technical difficulties. Our website not cooperating. Don't worry, we'll get them up there as soon as we possibly can. We'll work on that throughout the show. And in the meantime, if you have any complaints, that's wordpress.com/support or at WordPress on Twitter and Facebook. It's their problem, not ours. At them. Anyway, we'll get to the articles. Nonetheless, still lots of news making headlines today across the Great Lakes state. Our top story today from Bridge, Michigan. Their coronavirus tracker hospitalizations are up just a little bit, but still far below the mid-January peak of the Omicron variant surge. The number of patients with confirmed or suspected COVID-19 rose Monday to 511, the first time above 500 since March 28th of this year. Patient volumes have fallen since the Omicron wave peaked in mid-January at just above 5,000 cases, but there has been a small increase since hitting a recent low of 473 on April 1st, according to data released by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Michigan is reporting cases, deaths, and testing data only on Wednesdays at this point in the pandemic. It is continuing to release hospital data, however, 3 days per week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Federal hospital data collected by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which measures daily admissions for COVID-19, among other indicators, shows a slight rise in the average daily COVID-19 admissions over the past week. The state's hospitals are admitting an average of 84 new patients per day with confirmed or suspected COVID-19. That's up from the mid-70s at the beginning of April. In mid-January, the average was over 600 a day, for reference, according to the CDC data analyzed by Bridge, Michigan. Testing compiled by the CDC shows the percentage of positive coronavirus tests has remained flat, averaging about 4.3% of all tests, nearly identical to 4.2% of the week before. That full article from Bridge, Michigan on our website, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus at some point later on today. Again, that's wordpress.com/support for complaints on this matter. Also making headlines on our coronavirus page at some point today from the Detroit Free Press, Wayne County and Detroit police are sending used bulletproof vests to aid those on the front lines in Ukraine. Detroit police and the Wayne County Sheriff's Office officials announced on Monday they're donating used bulletproof vests to help Ukraine in its war with Russia, joining similar efforts by law enforcement agencies nationwide. Ukrainian authorities have accused Russian troops of committing war crimes against thousands of civilians during the conflict, which is now entering its 47th day following Monday. Wayne County Sheriff Raphael Washington and Detroit Police Chief James White said the reports of atrocities prompted them to try to help. Quote, "We sit here in the United States and we're watching the mass killings that are going on," Sheriff Washington said during a press conference at his office's Detroit headquarters. Continuing on, quote, "So we came up with the idea to try to get the vests we're no longer using over to the Ukrainian people to help save lives while they defend their area," and closed quote. The two agencies are sending about 160 vests to Ukraine with hopes to send even more, according to Chief White. Quote, "That's what we signed up for in this business, to save lives," Chief White said. Quote, "Any opportunity we can take to save someone's life, whether it's in the city streets, in the county streets, or anywhere, that's what we do," in close quote. The donated vests from both agencies were, quote, "just laying around," said Sheriff Washington, and were past their expiration dates. Normally expired vests are recycled and sold back to other agencies, he said. Chief White said the vest's expiration date means the manufacturer won't guarantee they will stop the types of rounds that they were made to withstand, but also insisted that they provide some protection beyond the listed dates. Quote, "There's a date stamp on the vests, but by all means, something is better than nothing," said Wayne County Sheriff's Lieutenant Matthew Gloster. Washington added, quote, "The vests still work. It's not like they stopped working after the expiration date," closed quote. Washington and White declined to list the monetary value of the donation, although new vests used by most officers in both agencies cost somewhere between $400 and $600 per vest, while vests with more protection used by special response teams can cost between $1,000 and $1,200 each, according to Chief White. The agency said both types of vests are being sent to Ukraine and said, quote, "We hope to send more vests in the future." That is from Chief White. In recent weeks, law enforcement and elected officials across the U.S. have announced similar donations. Last week, the governors of Ohio, Nebraska, and Iowa announced they're sending military-grade helmets and vests to those in Ukraine. Lastly, making headlines at some point today on our website at civiccentertv.com/coronavirus when WordPress wakes up. That's at WordPress on Facebook and Twitter. From the Detroit Free Press, an indigenous group wants justice after, quote, "being traumatized," in closed quote, during a raid at a Detroit park. A fire cracked softly in a small clearing in the woods of Rouge Park on Monday morning. Jefferson Ballou IV, Sonia Ballou, and Antonio Cosme stirred a boiling pot of maple sap over the flames. Beads of sweat rolled down their faces from the nearly 70-degree weather and their proximity to the fire. When the maple substance reached the perfect temperature and most of the water evaporated, they poured it out and used wooden paddles to stir it until it transformed into sugar. Quote, "It's magic," said Ballou IV. On February 18th, Detroit police officers shut down an indigenous sugar bush ceremony, threatening arrest at the same clearing in Rouge Park. Videos that circulated online after that event show officers saying, quote, "The sovereign stuff is not valid," in close quote. Yikes. Cosme, education coordinator with the National Wildlife Federation, said he remembered officers mocking them. Quote, "Oh, you have tribal law. How's that working out for you?" in close quote, kind of in a sarcastic way. Another officer responded, "Those laws don't matter here. This is the United States." Well, actually, officer, they do matter. They're sovereign. These are sovereign nations as well, and they have every right to be doing that. Anyway, continuing on in this article, now the ACLU and the Detroit Indigenous Peoples Alliance are calling on the police department to engage in restorative justice. Quote, "We're primarily concerned about the fact that what happened did not need to happen," said Mark Fancher, ACLU attorney, at a news conference on Monday, saying, continuing on, he said, quote, "It happened because of ignorance and cultural arrogance, a presumption that because a community chooses to worship the Creator in a way that may differ from the ways in which police officers might understand worship, or may differ from the particular faith traditions, that somehow it is less valid, it is somehow less legitimate, and somehow not protected by the law," in closed quote. Fonter said the ACLU is asking officers who shut down the ceremony to acknowledge the harm that they caused, accept responsibility for that harm, and make sure it doesn't happen again. If police are worried about a potential safety hazard, they could have pulled an organizer off to the side to discuss it rather than shut the whole event down, he said. Quote, "This entire thing could have gone down a very different way," Fonter said, continuing on. "If the officers, for whatever reason, had been concerned about the presence of a fire in this area, once they approached, had they known the importance of it to the community, then their decision probably would not have been, let's go in and stage a SWAT-type raid and disrupt everything," in closed quote. Detroit police spokesperson Rudy Harper said the department reached out to set up a meeting, but Sugarbush Project members asked for time to heal. Quote, "The officers did nothing wrong," Harper said, continuing on, quote, "The ceremony organizers did not have proper permits from the city," in closed quote. However, they did previously have permits to do the same thing, so you knew they were doing this beforehand. At some point, you knew they knew how to do so safely. All that really needs to happen in that scenario, theoretically, is you go up to them, you raise concerns about the open fire, you raise concerns about a lack of a permit, and figure out a diplomatic way to resolve the situation without creating a firestorm. No pun intended. Anyway, in a February 21st statement, Police Chief James White said the police officers only broke up the event because they saw a bonfire in the middle of a public park without a permit, and it was, quote, it was not, quote, directed as a means to break up a sacred cultural ceremony. Yeah, but that's what it did. White apologized for the quote-unquote interruption and said he is working with elected officials and community members to, quote, learn and grow from this situation. The Sugarbush Project has been operating in Detroit for 3 years with the goal of literally and figuratively tapping into the tradition of making maple syrup and passing on other ecological knowledge. Since its inception, project organizers have worked closely with the city and say they have a memorandum of understanding with the city of Detroit. On February 18th, their memorandum had just expired, and they were in the process of renewing it, Cosme said. They also filed a permit with the fire department, but it was filed incorrectly due to a clerical error. Detroit Deputy Fire Commissioner David Fornell told the Detroit Free Press on Wednesday that while the group applied for a permit, they never completed the application and therefore did not have a valid permit. That permit was less consequential, Cosme said. The fire department was not dispatched to their ceremony, so not a fire hazard, presumably, right? Cosme said he tried to tell the police that they were allowed to be there, but said the officers were not interested in talking and gave them 2 minutes to shut the entire ceremony down. One of the leaders at the Detroit Indigenous Peoples Alliance said the raid was, quote, traumatizing, and closed quote, but it won't stop them from continuing to practice their sacred traditions. In a quote from that individual, quote, our ceremonies, the necessary work of harvesting, processing, and sharing our resources like maple sugar are sacred and constitute the foundation of Anishinaabe culture, she said, continuing on. Consent for Indigenous ceremonies and activities does not come from city government, but from the Creator and from nature herself. These are not just leisure activities. This is who we are, and close quote. This particular Indigenous leader also said, quote, said Indigenous people have suffered a long history of, quote, broken promises, violated treaties, and religious persecution, and closed quote. The Detroit Indigenous Peoples Alliance has a list of demands to prevent such incidents and promote healing. However, she said, they include for the city to honor all treaties affecting Indigenous rights, recognize and aid the Sugarbush Project, and ensure that police who transgressed apologize and be reprimanded for their actions. All those articles will eventually be on our website sometime this morning, sometime today at civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, as well as we always have those up-to-date links that are ever helpful in understanding COVID-19 from the Centers for Disease Control, the MDHHS, and the Oakland County Health Division. So while you send your complaints to WordPress at wordpress.com/support, send your thanks as well that those links still work. We have a great program ahead on this Tuesday edition of the Oakland County Megacast. Coming up next, we will speak about COVID-19 with the Chief Medical Director of the Oakland County Health Division, Dr. Russell Faust. And then at 10:40, we'll talk all things investment with investment expert Dewey Steffen, who's also the host of the What Do We Do podcast. That's coming up next. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
We may come from different organizations,
but we work together to protect the Huron River for everyone.
Most of the pollution that goes into our rivers is carried by rainwater that flows off of roads, parking lots, and rooftops.
The leaves and bark of a single tree can retain a surprising amount of rainwater. Depending on its size and species, it could be 100 gallons or more.
It is estimated that an urban forest can reduce annual runoff by up to 7%.
Here's one thing that we know can help keep our water clean.
Plant a tree.
Plant a tree.
Plant a tree.
There's one water, and it's ours to protect.
One of the things you can look for in your friends is a change in behavior. These can be big changes, they can be small changes in mood, physical appearance. They may be sleeping less or sleeping more, drinking more, or their eating patterns may be different. One big change that can be pretty obvious is change in motivation. Do they no longer want to play basketball? Do they no longer want to play video games? Now that we're spending more time online and in virtual settings, it's really important to pay attention to the language that your friend is using and the words they're using to communicate.
So when we text our friends, are they taking longer amounts of time to respond? Are they not responding at all? You don't have to be an expert to try to recognize these signs. The second that you feel it in your gut and that you're concerned, that's the second to have the conversation and open the door to what might be going on.
Whatever gets you talking. Today, it is easier than ever to join Michigan's Organ Donor Registry and help build a bridge of hope
for organ, tissue, and eye donation. Just one person can potentially save or help improve the lives of up to 75 people. By joining, your legacy could be the gift of life. Sign up today at michigan.gov/SOS or at any of the more than 145 Secretary of State self-service stations located across Michigan. Be part of Michigan's Bridge of Hope by adding your name to the Organ Donor Registry.
Joining us now is the Chief Medical Officer at the Oakland County Health Division, Dr. Russell Faust, back with us once again on the Oakland County Megacast. Dr. Faust, thank you for being here.
Good to see you again, Tyler. Thanks for inviting.
Yeah, good to see you as well. So the BA.2 variant of COVID-19, it seems to be becoming more dominant in the U.S. as of past Wednesday. Michigan reported 3,215 new cases of COVID and 70 virus-related deaths on Wednesday. It's an average of about 643 cases over the past 5 days. At this moment in time, definitely less drastic of a COVID-19 situation than the last time we spoke. But where does Michigan and particularly Oakland County stand on the COVID-19 front at this moment in time?
Well, I think overall, we still have some pretty good news. This week, CDC reports that we are at 71 cases per 100,000 of population, which still keeps us in the low transmission category. And I think, that's where we want to remain. We're seeing just a mild upcreep versus last week, but overall, we've been, in the downtrend for a couple months now. And overall, I think this is all good news. I mean, I think the thing that gives me great hope is that unlike what had been seen in Europe, say Denmark, specifically when this BA.2 Omicron variant arrived there, they went into another huge surge, just an enormous surge. And we haven't been seeing that here. Omicron BA.2 has been present here in Oakland County now for nearly 3 months. And the fact is, it's just kind of creeping up in terms of its takeover. It's about 70 to 75% of all the cases right now in Oakland and across state. But the fact is, we're not seeing that surge. And I speculate that the reason is most of us have already had COVID, or we are fully vaccinated for COVID. And so our level of immunity in the community is very high. And I think what we're seeing is whereas people are still transmitting at a low level, people are not really getting that ill. Now, having said that, this is not yet endemic. That is, it's not like influenza, which is just everywhere. COVID is still killing people. People are still dying at about 10 times the rate they do for the other respiratory viruses, including influenza or flu. So this is still a dangerous virus, and we still need to take precautions. A mask when you're out in public. And I'm hopeful now, I'm very optimistic now that we're headed into warm weather, that we can take a lot of our meetings outdoors. We can open the windows and ventilate our offices when we do have meetings. I think overall, we're in a very good place right now in Michigan, in the country, and especially in Oakland County.
So we previously, the last time we had you on, we were in the middle of a COVID-19 surge with the Omicron variant. At that time, statistical models from the medical community were showing an expectation that that surge was going to at some point taper off and then dramatically reduce. That model has seemed to have come to fruition at this moment in time. Where are those statistical models at now for our near future? And I would presume they probably don't go as far as next fall, but I would also imagine that next fall, as the weather starts to get cooler, that would be the next time potentially, if we don't reach an endemic stage by that point, which is not all too far away temporally, that could be the next choke point of this pandemic where surging cases could become a problem. Where do the models show us going with COVID-19 at this point?
I think the good news is that we have been a surprise to the models. Most of the models are based on what we see kind of headed this way. We're able to predict, we're able to model things based on what happens, say, in Europe or in Australia or South America or the UK. specifically, and we're not seeing that. So I think we are now in a surprise phase, and that the models predicted that when Omicron BA2 hit here, that we would be surging again, and we're just not. So again, I'm cautiously optimistic in that, as we move through the summer months, we'll continue to at least stabilize, plateau, if not continue a downtrend. I am concerned for next fall, because human nature is, we see some good signs like this, and everybody thinks, now we're out of this pandemic, start to celebrate, not wear a mask, not maintain distance, not wash our hands, not take those usual, mitigating actions. And we may be in trouble again when school comes back in next fall. But I do want to emphasize, we've had little minor blips. We here at Oakland County are one of the many kind of nodes on the network where our laboratory is sampling wastewater in the community. Wastewater is just a euphemism for sewage. And twice a week now, we're sampling at 17 individual sites. And during the time when, after a lot of the schools, colleges had gone on break and then returned, folks had traveled, had let down their guard, not worn masks when they were in crowds. We had little blips in some of those dormitory populations, for example, but we just didn't see that continued. We didn't see the transmission. And again, most of us have either had COVID or been fully vaccinated or both. And I think we're in a very good place right now.
We're joined by Dr.
That was a long ramble. I don't know whether I answered your question, Tyler.
No, you did. We're joined by Dr. Russell Faust, the Chief Medical Officer at the Oakland County Health Division, joining us on the Oakland County Megacast. You can learn more information and keep up to date on COVID-19 from the Oakland County Health Division by visiting civiccentertv.com/coronavirus and clicking on our Oakland County link, which will take you directly to their COVID-19 specific webpage, where you can learn more information about COVID-19 in Oakland County, as well as vaccinations and booster shots, should you still be in the need of either at this moment in time. So Dr. Faust, what are some of the other lessons that the medical community has learned from managing this crisis for these past 2 years plus, and how does that help to inform other minor medical crises that may pop up in the years to come, or the next great crisis like a COVID-19 situation that we could have in the future?
Thank you. I love that question, Tyler. We've learned quite a bit. We've learned to be prepared. The last government regime basically had dropped the ball, and many of our warehouses that should be stocked with masks, gowns, gloves, etc., just weren't. And we're well stocked now, nationally. The other thing is, right now, all of the local health departments are pretty well-oiled machines now that they've been doing this for 2 years with regard to testing and vaccinating. The outreach clinics, they're just so good at it now that I think we're well prepared for the next epidemic or pandemic, as long as we, we maintain our readiness. I think we're certainly in a better position now. And I do want to emphasize that I'm grateful that the CDC at the federal level and state level has established this national network of collaborative labs and water resource commissions and public health teams to monitor wastewater. And already we're beginning to apply that to other viruses and other emerging pathogens that, we're just seeing kind of pop up now. We're beginning to apply these methods to keep the public safe. So I think a lot of good has come out of this.
So let's go into more detail on the wastewater testing. How does that testing then inform the next actions that are being taken by a health department, whether it be Oakland County, surrounding areas, or in a partnership between tri-county areas or at a state or regional level?
Sure. Well, the big benefit with regard to SARS-CoV-2 that causes COVID-19, the big benefit is that when we as we become infected, actually excrete in our stool, in our wastewater, we actually excrete viruses or particles of the virus that are detectable through testing in the wastewater prior to actually becoming clinically infected, that is manifesting the infection symptoms, and prior to us shedding virus, respiratory virus droplets. So the beauty there is that when we see that upsurge in virus in wastewater, we know that clinical cases are beginning to develop. And what we've been doing is monitoring wastewater in various congregate living facilities, dormitories, for example, and going in, testing everybody, finding the 2 or 3 people that are infected early and isolating them before they're able to transmit to everybody else and stopping an outbreak. So I think that's the model moving forward. Not all viruses have that kind of life cycle or presentation. But for those that do, the other coronaviruses and many other viruses, that's a good model. And I think the other value is that, as you point out, those collaborative teams, those partnerships moving forward have streamlined this process. And again, we are applying this to other hepatitis viruses, other coronaviruses, rather respiratory viruses, and some of the other emerging pathogens. And be happy to talk about that sometime, but that would take more than we have today.
We're joined by Dr. Russell Fauci, Chief Medical Director over at the Oakland County Health Division, joining us on the Oakland County Megacast. More information on our website, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. You click on the Oakland County link. It'll take you to the Oakland County Health Division's COVID-19 webpage, so you can learn more information about what they're doing to prevent the spread of COVID-19, to combat COVID-19 cases that are in Oakland County, as well as information on where you can get vaccinated or get your booster shot locally in the Oakland County area. civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. Right there at the top of the page, CDC, NDHHS, Oakland County is the third to the right at the top of that page. Dr. Faust, as we've seen more variants pop up, it seems like the last couple variants, Omicron and even Delta, have been more highly transmissible, not necessarily producing stronger symptoms or a greater chance of negative symptoms. That's probably
more severe disease.
More severe disease. Has kind of been the trend. It was what was seen more with Omicron. It's what's been seen with the BA2 subvariant of Omicron. As you and others on the scientific side of things in battling this pandemic are looking at COVID-19 as it continues to vary over time, is that kind of what's being imagined as these future variants are going to continue to be? They're going to be more easily spread, but maybe not be as deadly until we reach a point where we have seasonal uprisings of COVID-19 cases, but they're not at a point where they are at pandemic proportions that are overwhelming hospitals.
I think that's a pretty insightful question, Tyler. So the variants, every active infection is basically a factory of additional mutations. This is a mutating RNA virus. So every active infection produces more variants. The only variants that really survive or catch on and are transmitted are those variants that are more easily transmitted than the existing variant that's kind of spread through the population. So in order for a variant to really take over, you really can only do so by being more easily transmitted. Stickier, stick to the receptors a little bit better. There are many, possible mechanisms to be more transmissible. But yeah, I think moving forward, that's what we can expect. And I think as across our communities, the level of immunity is maintained or increased either through continued vaccination, as we do for influenza, or through natural or native immunity by being previously infected. I think moving forward, what we'll see is more easily transmitted variants, but less severe disease. And in fact, we see that right now. We're seeing transmission in the community at low, we're still in low level transmission, but we still see cases. But the difference is they're not filling our hospitals as they did, a year ago. They're just not filling our hospitals. And when this is the number I check on a daily basis, because this really gives us an insight into how well we're doing in the community. is how many cases are in our hospitals, and it's extremely low. It's very reassuring. But I think you're correct. That's what we can expect.
And so, Dr. Faust, earlier on you mentioned that we're not at the point where COVID-19 is endemic. We are at a very low spread of COVID-19 in comparison to the past. The community spread isn't as severe as it has been, and it continues to trend further toward going down. And then maybe this is a more complicated question than simply at a county level, and I know it is because this is a pandemic, it's worldwide. Where is that point where the scientific community, where the medical community would be able to properly declare something like COVID-19 to be reaching an endemic viral spread?
Yeah, that is a very complicated question, or the answer is very complicated. And I think there's a fair amount of disagreement among the medical and scientific community for what that trigger is, what that threshold is. What do we need to reach in terms of level of transmission? But I think really a lot of it has to do with the lethality of this virus. And so, the World Health Organization is still saying that we're still a way off from COVID-19 being endemic, but really the pandemic is not only the global aspect of this, many countries involved, but also the rapid growth of transmission and infection. We're really kind of coming out of that pandemic phase. And I think if we continue to be plateaued or kind of downtrending as we hit next fall, I think it will be reasonable to consider ourselves out of an emergency or pandemic kind of phase. Perhaps not technically endemic, according to all the medical scientists, but I think that would be a great milestone. I think beyond that, I think we'll have little epidemics of geographic clusters of infections and outbreaks. But I think we can all look forward to that time.
Dr. Faust, before we let you go, anything else at this time that would be important for people in Oakland County to be keeping front of mind on the COVID-19 front, or other things medically in the community?
Yeah, two things. And thanks for asking. Really, if you haven't gotten your flu shot, get your flu shot. If you are co-infected with SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, and influenza, your mortality risk goes up more than 6 times being infected by either one alone. You don't want to be infected with both. So get your flu shot. And the second thing is make sure that you're optimally, maximally vaccinated against COVID-19. We're out to a second booster now for eligible populations, but check the website, see where you are, get your second vaccination, get your booster if you qualify, get your second booster if you qualify, and stay healthy.
Dr. Faust, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tyler.
Today it is easier than ever to join Michigan's Organ Donor Registry and help build a bridge of hope for organ, tissue, and eye donation. Just one person can potentially save or help improve the lives of up to 75 people. By joining, your legacy could be the gift of life. Sign up today at michigan.gov/SOS or at any of the more than 145 Secretary of State self-service stations located across Michigan. Be part of Michigan's Bridge of Hope by adding your name to the Organ Donor Registry.
When times get dark, we can't see the help that's all around us. When you don't know where to turn, let 211 be your guiding light.
How can I help you?
Our guides are ready to connect you with the help you need. For help with food, healthcare, mental health, and other resources, call 211 or visit 211.org. 211. Get connected, get help.
If you are struggling to afford your internet bills during the pandemic, there's a temporary government program that may be able to help. It's called the Emergency Broadband Benefit, and it provides up to a $50 monthly discount on your broadband bill to qualifying households. Find more information about the program, including if you qualify and how to enroll, at fcc.gov/broadbandbenefit or call toll-free at 833-511-0311.
A public service announcement from 89.3 Lakes FM.
Whether you're the city,
The county.
or the Huron River Watershed Council.
We work together to protect water resources for everyone.
Most of the pollution entering our rivers is carried by rainwater that runs off roads, parking lots, and rooftops.
a rain garden helps catch stormwater runoff.
Rain gardens and their plants help dirty runoff soak into the ground.
You can do your part to help keep our water clean.
Learn about rain gardens and native plants.
So consider a rain garden in your home landscaping.
Catch the runoff with a rain garden.
There's one water, and it's ours to protect.
I couldn't breathe at all. There was lots of talk about putting me on a ventilator. I thought I was gonna die. I was 39 weeks pregnant and had a scheduled C-section. During that time, I got COVID and was hospitalized for a month. I had a blood clot in my lungs. It caused me to go into right-sided heart failure. I was really scared. I kept texting my husband and my mom, telling them how scared I was, and I was worried that he was gonna grow up without a mom. And then I was worried if, when I did get home, that he wouldn't know who I was. You know, being 27 and a mom and a wife and having that all almost taken away from me. It's scary, and if a vaccine can prevent that from happening, why not? Get your vaccine. I don't want this to happen to anybody else.
Welcome back to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe. Learn more about the program by visiting our website at civiccentertv.com/megacast, where you'll learn more about all of our partnering stations from community television and radio outlets all throughout Oakland County. civiccentertv.com/megacast, where you can also find every episode and each individual interview on demand as well. Joining us now is the CEO and the Chief Investment Officer with Great Lakes Wealth and the one of the co-hosts of the What Do We Do podcast. Dewey Steffen's back with us once again on the Megacast. Dewey, thank you for being with us.
Hey, Tyler, great to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Hey, good to see you as well. So, kind of an interesting time we're in. The economy's kind of all over the place. High inflation, low unemployment rate, up and down stock market, and then there's never any certainty necessarily in the stock market or in investing. So at this time, what is your advice in terms of things that people should be focusing on in the market that may be protective, but also be putting out a little bit of that risk that could be a big boom for them in the future?
Well, Tyler, you hit it right on the head. As Confucius say, may you live in interesting times. And we certainly have those. So yes, it comes back to the basics though of the 3 Ps in this environment. Don't panic, be patient, and execute your plan. So as we always say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So whether it's certain times of maybe a year or two ago to uncertain times of now, if you will, you always just have to have a plan and, you're on your way.
We're joined by Dewey Steffen, the CEO and Chief Investment Officer of Great Lakes Wealth, with us on the Oakland County Megacast. So inflation's high, the cost of goods and services are also at record high levels in some cases. How does that change the way that you approach investment advice and how people that are out in the market should be approaching their investments, given that at some point this adjustment will be made, things may return back to some semblance of normal, but it could be a while in the market before that adjustment's made?
Tyler, again, you're right on it. So this is part of the business cycle. For a long time, we were in the early phase, the middle phase. We think we're in the late phase. And then the fourth phase is actually recession. So we haven't talked about recession in a long time. In 2008, we had the Great Recession. More recently, when COVID started, we had a mild, fast recession. A recession is 2 quarters back-to-back of negative GDP. So with high inflation, as you mentioned, with all the things that are changing, your investment strategy needs to change as well. What got us here is not what's going to get us there in terms of investing. So we say things like rotate and rebalance.
So when you're talking about preparing yourself for a potential recession, that can, I would imagine, for a lot of people, be spooky, be something that spooks them into maybe getting out of the market in certain places or moving some of their money around into safer investments. What should they be doing to prepare for that point where we do go through the cycle and into the recession point, so that they're not losing a ton of money in the market from their investments, from their investment stock prices going down due to the recession and the ultimate effects of that, but also in a way that doesn't affect them and their potential gains down the line when the market does adjust back to some semblance of normal or in a positive direction?
Certainly. So we're not in recession yet. So let's slow down and understand where we are. You mentioned our podcast. So the What Do We Do podcast, I have our little mug right here. We had an episode that came out last Wednesday, number 57, and we talked about at the end of the first quarter and how to invest for success for the rest of this year. We talked about this being the late stage of the business cycle from our perspective, and the investments are different. So you need to have hard assets. You need to have investments that pay dividends. You need to recognize, again, where we are and have a playbook for success. And Tyler, to your point, what got us here is not what's going to get us there. And with a recession, it doesn't have to be a deep dive recession. It can be what's called a mild recession. And the reason the markets are under pressure and a lot of the stock markets globally are negative, and some of them are into what they call bear markets, if you want to call it that, it's because people are trying to front run and prepare and get out prior to this recession. And again, we don't think that's appropriate because we're not in recession yet. So again, it's not convoluted. It's just you need to understand what you're trying to accomplish and why. But in late stage investing, it is not the tech stocks that get you where you need to be. When the Fed is raising rates, when there is a slowdown in the economy, it is not the NASDAQ, it is not the tech stocks that lead the charge. It is a whole new set of investments. Those, again, that pay dividends, those that are more in the large cap in nature. So again, you need to understand what you have and where you're going.
We're joined by Dewey Steffen, CEO and Chief Investment Officer with Great Lakes Wealth. More information on the website, greatlakeswealth.us. And we also mentioned the What Do We Do podcast. You can learn more information and view their episodes and listen to their episodes on whatdowedopodcast.com. That's what Dewey, D-E-W-E-Y, do podcast.com for more information on the podcast. And, of course, you can learn more about it as well at greatlakeswealth.us. And so we're in the middle of April. We're approaching the end of the school year for colleges and universities. That means graduation. That means new people coming into the job market and full-time work. And some of those will have benefits with their new employers and be able to begin their own investing, or be able to do, or are more than capable of doing so now, even before that. So for these young people that are coming into the workforce, that are coming into the market for the first time, what is your advice for them as they're entering this market, especially given the times that we're in, to put their best foot forward and start planning for their future?
Tyler, great question. And this is an exciting time to be a college graduate. It might be filled with anxiety, but in days gone by and decades past, students would come out of college and say, there's no jobs. There's no jobs. I don't know what to do. I can't get a job. This will be the first time ever in history that the kids coming out of college won't be able to get jobs and live the best life, compared to their parents and grandparents. Well, it's the opposite. There are 11 million jobs posted and only 6 million people looking. We have full employment of 3.6% unemployment, which is full employment. However, there's 11 million jobs available out there. And we did a podcast on this thing called the Great Resignation, where more than 50% of people working are not happy currently where they're at. A lot of times the employees can dictate wages right now. There's a lot of things going on. So if I'm coming out of college now, I am fired up. So what you need to do is then be responsible. Certainly when you get that opportunity and get employment, then set yourself up for success. Enroll immediately into the company-sponsored retirement plan, either a 401k or 403b. And if they match, you absolutely better be putting enough of your own money in to get that entire match. And then from there, you just take steps 2, 3, and 4. But I'll take a break, see what you have to say.
And so with those students coming out, with them getting those jobs that are available to them, and many of those having benefits be attached to them as an incentive to get some of these high quality candidates fresh out of college, fresh out of university into these jobs, that also brings up the topic of student loan debt. On one hand, you have an opportunity to invest your money and get that full match, but on the other hand, your paycheck's by and large going toward your bills and certainly to start paying down those debts. So what's your advice for those students coming out into the workforce and into the market now with their loans now beginning to be due in full capacity, to make that balance between paying their bills, of course, is always important, but also not neglecting their financial planning for the future?
Yeah, it's just like everything else. You need to have a diversified portfolio. You need to have good debt and retire or get rid of or service bad debt. You also need to make sure you have good investments and get rid of or service or retire bad investments. So it kind of goes both ways. With that, in terms of your debt and where we're at now, interest rates are going up. And that doesn't matter whether it's your school loans and that debt or credit card debt or a mortgage. So we say deal with debt. That's actually number one, deal with debt. So get rid of bad debt, but also take advantage of good debt. If you are going to be getting purchase a new home or a condo or something, a car, whatever it might be, get those interest rates locked in now. They're going to be going higher. So deal with debt, get rid of bad debt, and lock in what we would consider good debt. That's number one, Tyler. And then after that, you need to invest in your company plan. You need to also, with student debt, it's probably in the lower interest rate range. So you can make your minimum payments on that, service that debt, but also with the extra income that you have, don't blow it. Don't go party. Don't start with vacations. Make sure you start responsibly, invest for success, deal with debt, and you're on your way to prosperity.
We're joined by Dewey Steffen, CEO and Chief Investment Officer at Great Lakes Wealth. Learn more information on their website, greatlakeswealth.us, and a ton of financial tips and investment tips from their podcast, the What Do We Do podcast, whatdowedopodcast.com for more information and to watch and listen to all of their episodes and find their social media as well. And so, Dewey, as you have all these different options in the market, at this given time, there's always that debate between beyond your company-matched investments, usually a 401k, do you invest in an IRA, in a Roth IRA, or in some other investment form in the market? Is it a good time for an IRA to start that off, or to really put a lot of effort into building an IRA or a Roth IRA at this time, given the market that we're in?
Absolutely. So taxes are predicted to go up as well because of paying for all the things dealing with COVID, plus the situation we're in. So your 401k at work or 403b, as well as IRAs and Roths, those are considered tax sheltered or tax-free vehicles, Tyler. So they're so important for today because you can get at least tax deferred growth, but maybe even tax-free growth. And when tax rates will be higher, as again, younger people have increases in their wages, your tax rate goes up as well. So all the way around, make sure you do your 401k or 403b, even if there is no match. That doesn't matter. Still do that. And then if you qualify for a Roth IRA, which is basically under $140,000 of income for this year, if you're single, and you actually have until April 18th, which is next Monday, to put in for last year, so it's not too late for 2021. So do your Roth IRA, absolutely, number one, no doubt about it.
So on that note, you mentioned that April 18th deadline for putting money into your IRA for the 2021 tax year, despite us being 4 months and some change into 2022. how can that impact ultimately your tax implications for 2021 and even impact potentially your tax return, which then can be further invested into the market?
Well, even if you've already filed your 2021 tax return, you can still amend it, or in this case, you can just still deposit to a Roth IRA if you qualify. It does not have any bearing on your tax return. There's no deductions. There's no, penalties. There's no anything. So you can still go ahead and do your Roth IRA. When you start talking about different retirement vehicles, whether that's a traditional IRA, that's a whole nother ball of wax. And as we always say, please consult a tax professional, a CPA, a financial advisor. Don't go it alone. Find some help, and we'll be happy to help.
More information on their website and get in contact with them for help if you so choose to do so. GreatLakesWealth.us. That's GreatLakesWealth.us. Their podcast, What Do We Do Podcast, Dewey, D-E-W-E-Y, What Do We Do Podcast.com to listen to all those episodes. And let's talk about the What Do We Do podcast. You mentioned some of the more recent episodes. What is on the docket for the What Do We Do podcast? What sort of advice can watchers, can listeners expect to learn in the near future?
Tyler, I am so excited to share that our podcast, which is now almost 2 years old, has over 30,000 downloads and views and listens. That's incredible, from something that just started here as a community project during COVID to help members of our community not just survive, but thrive. And as we've grown and the podcast has grown, so has our content. I do have a co-host, Brooke Allen. She's, a radio on-air personality. She's fantastic. So her and I kind of tackle subjects together, but we also bring in guests. And Tyler, this is where it's exciting. We've had amazing guests on the past. We've had Red Wing great Darren McCarty. We've had Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary. Here locally, and this would be important for those that are maybe coming out of college, we had Casey Herbis, the Chief Marketing Officer at Rocket Mortgage. We've had recently David Provost, the retired chairman of the board from Huntington Bank. But here who's coming up next. We have Tom Chilani. He is a businessman local. He is a philanthropist, national, global. He'll be coming on in the next month or so to talk about, how his family started from modest means and how he's grown this amazing empire of entrepreneurship. So that's Tom Chilani coming up. And then to end of season 2, we have a commitment from LPGA star Jessica Korda, and she's going to give an interview with us exclusive for the What Do We Do podcast in June. And she, again, is going to talk about all things in her world, from investing to what it takes to be a successful athlete and everything from being a female in a competitive environment. So we're excited for the content we have in terms of educating in financial matters, but also bringing on leaders in the community to tell their story and their suggestions to help our community not just survive, but thrive.
GreatLakesWealth.us is their website, GreatLakesWealth.us, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn at Great Lakes Wealth as well. The What Do We Do podcast can be found online, whatdowedopodcast.com, or by following any of the Great Lakes Wealth social media, again, at Great Lakes Wealth. Dewey, thank you for joining us.
Hey, awesome to be here with you, Tyler. Thanks again for having me.
Appreciate it. More information, again, GreatLakesWealth.us for more helpful tips, getting in contact with Dewey and his team over there at Great Lakes Wealth, and for more information and to view and listen to their podcast, What Do We Do? On their website, GreatLakesWealth.us. We're going to take a break on your radio homes for the Megacast, 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake and 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. On the other side, we'll kick off the Michigan Megacast with a great guest. I'm really excited to talk to the Reverend Dr. Patricia Coleman Burns from the University of Michigan, a distinguished assistant professor over there, and also an award-winning advocate for those out in our communities. Recently was a recipient of an award from the Oakland County Board of Commissioners. She will join us at 11 o'clock, and then at 11:20, Michelle Sider, a local artist who's got some of her art on display at the Janice Carrot Gallery in West Bloomfield out in Oakland County, will join us as well. That's all coming up next. This is the Michigan Megacast.
You see certain things get reincarnated in your children. My daughter is very much inspired by my wife's artistic pursuits. So my daughter started making necklaces. She makes what we call affirmation fashion. I tell her every day that your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. You're black is beautiful. And if there's anything better than being beautiful, it's being smart. And if there's anything better than being smart, it's being kind. And reaffirming that every day is our method of making sure her chin never drops. My dad wasn't around, and I remember riding a bike and falling off and cutting myself, and me never just wanted to get back on it. People ask, how your children learn how to ride a bike, and you didn't. I didn't teach them. I just created an environment where they taught themselves, and all I had to do was be there.
Whether you're the city,
the county,
or the Huron River Watershed Council.
As partners, working together to protect our water resources, we agree.
Pet waste is the source of harmful bacteria in the Huron River.
When it's left on the ground, it can wash into the storm drains.
These lead directly to our streams. No filters, no treatment.
Here's one thing we know that can help keep our water clean.
Pick up pet waste and trash it.
Pick up pet waste and trash it.
So pick up pet waste and trash it.
There's one water, and it's ours to protect.
Joining us now on the program is the Reverend Dr. Patrice Coleman Burns, Assistant Professor Emerita of Nursing and Black Studies at the University of Michigan. Dr. Coleman Burns, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, and good morning to you, Tyler.
Yeah, good morning to you as well. So recently, at the last regular March meeting of the Oakland County Board of Commissioners, you were recognized as one of the notable women for your in the county for your lifelong advocacy for freedom from all forms of oppression. First, congratulations on that honor from the Oakland County Board of Commissioners. What was your reaction when they told you that you were going to be honored by the board for your service in the community?
Well, thank you for acknowledging their award for me. You know, my first reaction was, how did they know that I was doing all of this? You know, of course you send in the bio, but it's really important to understand and to respect the communities that we show up in, that people are looking and watching who we are and what we do. So my first response was, well, thank you. At first it came from Marcia Gershenson, who was of my old district, and then by County Commissioner William Miller. So it was quite a surprise and very well received by me.
So you were chosen for an award in part because of your lifelong advocacy for freedom against all forms of oppression and violence. Can you talk about some of that advocacy work that you've been a part of, and what are any specific moments in your life that really drew you toward being an advocate for those that are facing oppression in our communities and beyond?
There are so many. So I will turn 75 this year, which is a big milestone. So that means I have almost 50 years of advocacy. When I started out, things like women's studies and Chicano Barica studies and Black studies didn't exist. And we created those. I started out at Wayne State University. And it was important because often we centered lives and views and perspectives that excluded so many of us. And so I began to do that work, starting out with violence against women and children, because in the days in which we started in the late 80s, it was sort of under the table. Folk did not mention it. It was a domestic issue. And to do that work, to get the community involved, the police involved, to rise to the occasion, not only of responding, but asking the question, where is this abuse coming from? Where is this hatred, this misogyny, this hatred of women coming from? And how do we address it? And so for 50 some years, I've been involved in that kind of work. More recently, maybe now about 5 years ago, moving to being on the board of Safe House in Washtenaw, and which was quite interesting to me because when I started out in the 80s, no one knew where the shelter was because it had to be underground, so to speak. And to move to see the progress that it is a public space in Washtenaw Safe House and supported by the community. Those are some examples of my advocacy in that regard, and certainly around Black studies and women's studies, and now at the university, women of color in the academy and the work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But please feel free to ask me and target on any areas that you would be interested in knowing about.
Yeah, certainly we've had in the last couple of years during the pandemic, certainly in the summer of 2020, a lot of these conversations, a lot of these discussions on oppression of certain populations. You mentioned women, but also the African American community, the communities of color, especially in the last few years with different forms of violence in America and right here in the state of Michigan as well. As far as those conversations have come in the past decades and certainly in the past few years, there's still a lot of progress going forward. And so that's why it's important to have advocates like you out in the community to speak up on these issues, but also to bring to light that these issues are far from being solved. So for you, what is your advice to those other advocates, to those young people that are also advocates for freedom from all forms of oppression in our community, to have their voices heard and to also support those in the community that may be facing these forms of oppression today?
Thanks for that question, Tyler. I think first and foremost is to connect the dots. Many of your generation, and I'm making an assumption about what generation you're from, have no sense of the history and struggle that has preceded to make sure that that history and that information is passed forward so that our young people understand the choices that have been made and therefore the challenges that now face us. The second is to absolutely be true to ourselves. We must show up as our authentic selves. So we say women and then African Americans. Well, I am, as Sojourner Truth said, I am a Black woman. The intersectionality of so many identities is important to look at and for us to work together. Number three, to make sure that voices that have historically been excluded, marginalized, othered, are voices that are heard as we go forward. Why? Because we find that when we include more people with different values and cultures, same values, of course, that we seem to do better. When we listen to each other and we hear each other, we are enlarged individually and collectively, because when we show up, and that we is inclusive of all of us, then we are a better people and a better society going forward.
We're joined by the Reverend Dr. Patrice Coleman Burns from the University of Michigan, Assistant Professor Emerita of Nursing and Black Studies, and recent awardee from the Oakland County Board of Commissioners, recognized as one of many notable women for her lifelong advocacy for freedom against all kinds of oppression. And so, Dr. Coleman Burns, as much as we've seen progress in the past few decades, as much as you've seen these conversations and these topics and the oppression of certain populations in American society and in global society reduce in some cases and change in other cases, and sometimes in both ways over your years of life experience, and seeing what we're also experiencing in these current times, particularly on the cases of race and on gender equality as well. Do you have hope for us in the future that we will be eventually able to resolve some of these issues or find more productive ways to discuss these issues, to advocate for these populations, and ultimately to create a better world that is more equitable for all populations?
Thank you. I have two responses to that. I'm a living proof that we have done better. I buried the last of my father's and my mother's generation, my Aunt Cora. She was 96, and we buried her last week. But my father brought the whole family up from the South, the rural South, in the 40s, escaping lynchings, escaping oppression, coming to Detroit, to build a better life. So number one, I'm a testimony that we have made progress. I live in a city now, historically, that was excluded Blacks and Jews. I'm living in a house that historically, because of redlining and racism, I can now live in. That's progress. The second thing is to understand that any oppression of me as a Black African-American woman also dehumanizes all of us. We have to ask the question, how has the way and the oppression, the invalidation, the assaults, the insults, how has it hampered the humanity of all of us? If race is a construct, not only is Blackness constructed, but so is whiteness. And what is that construct? And what do we need to do that we might show up and see each other in the integrity of who we are and the authenticity of who we are culturally and broadly? You know, when you look at, I look at the map of what's going on in Ukraine, and all around Ukraine, there are various nations, Poland, Romania, Russia. These are nations that have rich historic cultures. And yet when we get to the United States, we want people to ignore and forget who they are and what values their grandparents brought. So my message and my hope for the future is that, like I build up on the ancestors of those who come before me, that all of us will see the value of building up on that history, that ancestry, in order that we might be better than we started out being. So I have lots of hope. I've seen it happen.
We're joined by Reverend Dr. Patricia Coleman Burns, a University of Michigan Assistant Professor Emerita of Nursing and Black Studies, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. You've been, for the past 30 years, an assistant professor of nursing and Black Studies. What drew you to the teaching profession, specifically drew you to college teaching, especially considering that these individuals that you would be teaching in these cases are so close to being leaders in our workforce and leaders in our community in the years to come?
That is an excellent question. I think about, you know how, and I am a religious person, how there's a burning inside of each of us, even you, and all of our audience members, and you have this drive and this thirst and you just can't shake it. And when I was a little girl, I would set up all my dolls in front of me and I would teach them. I would teach them because I love knowledge, I love information, I love the process of interrogating questions and thoughts and ideas. And so I came to the university, first at Wayne State University, in the beginning because I had something to share. I had a perspective and a rigor and a discipline that I thought would enlarge and empower young people to find out not who their parents wanted them to be, not who the world says, well, this is, you know, these are the degrees you need to have, but to find the core of who they are. Because when we show up in our own passion and our own gifts, we are a blessing not only to ourselves, but to the rest of the community and to the world. So I love teaching. I love to see young people find out who they are. And in all these years, I was looking back over Facebook, you know, you get to see some of those young people that you sold into 40 years ago, and they are doing well. It is a testimony of how we can, as a democratic society that includes and respects the diversity of all of us, that seeks to achieve equity, how we can be greater than we've ever been, or like Langston Hughes, be the America that we ought to be.
Dr. Coleman Burns, as you converse with your students, as you see the ways that their minds work, that they that they soak in the information that you're providing to them and the context of that information that you're providing to them and the connections between that information, whether it be in the nursing side, whether it be on the Black Studies side, or in general life experience that you are sharing with them. How does that inform your future worldview and your ability to look at the future of our society and have that hope that you talked about earlier on in resolving or better, more productively mitigating some of these man-made issues, such as equity and equality differences, such as oppression in our society?
So, number one, I show up in a space where I think students understand that I support and am true to my beliefs and my values. Therefore, they share with me a courage that generations before have not had. They are willing to be critical and to be inclusive, and they encourage me to show up and give the history and knowledge of what I've learned. So, for example, many of our students say they can walk into a classroom and know immediately if there's homophobia existing, that they will be excluded, or if they are to not raise certain issues, or if they're not, because those vibes are expressed in the classroom by our faculty. And they give me courage to call those things out, to listen to them, to work with students, to figure out a way that they can be their authentic selves and create and be the leaders for the future that they know they are inheriting. And so what I find in the classroom is, one, they're surprised in the first place that I am at all technologically literate because they see my gray hair and then they get concerned. But I listen to them. And they keep me alive, and I feed back into them. And one thing they know about Dr. Coleman Burns, they call me PCB, is that I will show up for them whenever I am needed by them, listening, hearing what they have to say, and in many cases, not only advocating in the community, in the grassroots community, but advocating for them in the classroom. And they know that I'll do that.
Dr. Coleman Burns, earlier on, you had mentioned how your faith helps to inform your advocacy work, how it helps to inform your teaching work as well. For the past 20 years, you've been a minister at the First African Methodist Episcopal Church of Farmington Hills. For the past 3 years, you've been serving as their senior pastor. What sort of fulfillment do you get out of that role in your church community, too, that mirrors or is similar or parallels the satisfaction you get from your advocacy work and your teaching work?
That is a great question. Because of my faith, I know it's not about me. I know I'm not the center of the universe. Because of my faith, I get up each morning with the belief and the idea that the manifestation of the God that I serve is possible in all people. Let me say it another way. I'm just a human being, very frail. And because of my faith, I can have forgiveness. I can deal with any of my hurt or harm that I've experienced in my 74 years of living. And that I can see the love and possibility in all people, whether they see it in themselves or not. And so it's been quite fulfilling to be in a community that respects the work of truth and reconciliation and honesty. And so I do indeed believe that it is this connection between who we are beyond our lives here in this space and the legacy that we can leave behind and the way in which we show and demonstrate love and build a beloved community.
Dr. Coleman Burns, before we let you go, anything else that you'd like to say today that we haven't talked about, or any lasting words of advice for those out in the community at this time?
I think we're in a very dangerous period where if we don't look and seek for knowledge and truth and listening, that we need to listen to people who are very different from us and hear and not come up with some predetermined platform, that we can then become a beloved community. And that is what my wish and my vision is as we move forward. So thank you so much, Tyler, for your hosting and for your questions, very thoughtful, and for leading us in this discussion. You have a great day.
You as well. Thank you so much.
Who is struggling right now?
I am.
My son is. Many are struggling with anxiety, depression, and substance use. Before it becomes a crisis, reach out to MyCal, the Michigan Crisis and Access Line, for free confidential support 24/7. Available in the Upper Peninsula and Oakland County. Just call or text 1-844-44-MyCal or chat online at michigan.gov/MyCal. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Motorcyclists are hard to see. To keep everyone safer, it's important to always look for them and know where most crashes occur. 84% of motorcycle and vehicle crashes happen on streets, not highways. And most crashes with motorcyclists occur when vehicle drivers are turning left. So before turning, especially to the left, make sure you look for motorcyclists. Then look again. It could save a life.
Pleased to be joined now by a mixed media artist, Michelle Sider, whose current works you can find over at the Janice Carrick Gallery in West Bloomfield Township. Michelle, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to speak with you.
And glad to have you with us. First, can you tell us about your background and kind of how you got into these forms of art that you produce and what drew you to it as a career?
Well, I've always been creative. My mom tells a story that as an infant, I was playing with the sunbeams that came through the window. So and she helped to encourage me. And my aunt was an artist, among other things. So I had some great examples. But it was really my high school art teacher who said to me that I should consider going into art as a profession. And I hadn't really considered it seriously until then. So I have her to thank, Mrs. Benson. And I went to art school at University of Michigan, and I was mainly a painter. I've been a painter for many, many years. And then I had a little circuitous route. I became a psychologist and used art therapy, art teacher, and now I'm doing my art full-time. But when I started back 7 years ago to do my art full-time, I really switched from painting to glass mosaic. And it is a medium that I just love. I love the glass. I have some of it behind me. You can see some of it reflecting. There's different types of glass that reflect in different ways, and you can put it in at different angles. And I'm having a whole lot of fun incorporating my painting background with a whole new medium. And kind of doing this a little later in life, I have some things to say that I wouldn't have wanted to, or didn't have in mind to say when I was working, when I was younger.
So you began your journey as an artist as a painter, and now you're doing work more with glass art. And I see the works behind you. For those that are listening on the radio, highly encourage you to go to civiccentertv.com/megacast later on in the day and view this. You can see some of Michelle's work behind her in the background of her interview. These glass works, you said that behind you, this is all glass, correct?
Correct.
And
yeah.
So they look like paintings. They're made of glass, but they look like paintings, and you're labeled as a mixed media mosaic artist. Can you give us a little bit of insight in what that means to be a mixed media artist and create art that looks and is of a variety of different art forms?
Well, as I said, I started out as a painter, and the works at mixed media to me now, I'm still painting a bit, but I'm mainly doing glass mosaic. And the reason why I say mixed media is because I am incorporating a whole bunch of different things into the works. So for those people who can see, behind me, I have one of my recent series which, on the side of the road, where I am collecting and using different things that I've collected from the side of the road, such as bicycle gears and pieces of metal and things like that, rocks, and incorporating it in with the glass. It's mainly glass that I'm using, but the other piece to the other side of me, which is another series I'm doing, has handmade jewelry. I've been researching and creating handmade jewelry that is going into these pieces that tell some historical information. So mixed media is, I'm kind of having fun discovering different types of glass from all over the world. Some are chunky and thick, and some are iridized, and I place them in at different angles to create different effects. So I'm actually not just showing light in my pieces, but I'm actually creating light by the angles in which I place the different pieces to see and have something fun that changes color throughout the day. And it's really a fun experience to look at. And my painting background, you can see, I actually, underneath each one of my mosaics is a fully realized painting. I spend a lot of time drawing and painting and figuring out what I'm going to do before I start. So yeah, I'm incorporating a lot of different aspects from my background into my pieces now.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see these because, as I mentioned earlier, they do look like paintings. They're made of glass, and now that you mentioned that you have actual paintings behind them, the glass element of it does give it a certain depth and a certain three-dimensional nature to it that really adds to these pieces. How much of an impact has your painting background had, or an influence has that had on the composition, particularly, of your glass pieces?
It's huge, actually. Actually, I'm going to be teaching a class online about it soon. It is a big part. I really thank my classical instructors for learning about composition and value and color theory and how to direct somebody's eye to a certain part of a piece. One example I use, a lot of people are familiar with Vermeer's painting of the woman with the pearl earring, where that's what everybody looks at as a pearl earring, because he's created a focal point that's bright for the pearl and everything else around it is dark. So the idea is that as an artist, you can actually lead the viewer's eye to where you want them to look and what you want them to see, and actually how you want them to, hopefully, expressing an idea and a feeling through the colors, through the composition. So it's for me, it's critical in how I put these pieces together. And then the fun, it's kind of another fun added experience of then creating that imagery with glass. And the glass is not transparent, it's actually opaque. And the colors are very, very rich.
And so you can see a lot of Michelle's work at the 4th Annual Michigan Regional Glass Exhibition. That is at the Janice Carrick Gallery in West Bloomfield. That's on the campus of the Jewish Community Center on Drake Road in West Bloomfield Township. That's running now through May 18th over there at the Janice Carrick Gallery. Now through May 18th, the 4th Annual Michigan Regional Glass Exhibition. Can you tell us about some of the pieces that you have on site there at the Janice Carrick Gallery that are part of this exhibition, and what were some of the choices that you made behind putting those certain pieces in this exhibition?
Well, first of all, I'm very excited to be in the exhibition. I'm among 52 glass artists, and I'm honored to be the only glass mosaic artist in the group. There's a lot of a variety of different things that each artist is doing something very different with glass. So it's really an interesting show, and there's great light in the gallery, so you can see it really well. The pieces that I have in the show are from my On the Side of the Road series, which is really, I think, a really cool series, which was inspired inspired, as everybody can relate to the condition of the Michigan roads with potholes and cracks. I had an experience where I was riding my bicycle and I had to look down so I wouldn't hit a pothole or go into a crack and get hurt. And while I was looking down, I noticed that the cracks in the cement and the cracks in the concrete and the sides of the asphalt created really interesting composition and designs with the cracks themselves. So I got all excited as an artist. I hop off my bike. I started taking photos of these different abstract patterns. I went back into my studio and started drawing and painting, and eventually made some glass mosaic pieces that show my view from the side of the road as I'm looking down, and these kind of cool, it's a cool abstract patterns. So the pieces in the show are abstract, but if you look and understand that it's from the seat of my bicycle, you can kind of see that you're kind of looking down a perspective a little bit down a road, and with all sorts of interesting, there's rocks, there's beads, there's glass, there's different materials in them that are reflective and interesting. And for the people who can see on TV right now, the piece behind me actually has the bicycle gears and chains and rocks and different things in there that are just, it's fun and very abstract, fun series. But making a commentary about our state of our infrastructure.
We're joined by mixed media mosaic artist Michelle Sider on the Oakland County Megacast. Her work on display among the art of 51 other glass artists at the Jazz Carrot Gallery in West Bloomfield Township now through May 18th of this year. You can learn more information by visiting gallery.jccdet.org. Gallery.jccdet.org for their hours of operation and to learn more about Michelle and the 51 other artists on display at the 4th Michigan Regional Glass Exhibition over there at the Jazz Carrot Gallery, running now through May 18th of this year. And so, Michelle, you had mentioned earlier that you were at one point in your career an art teacher. You were also a kid that grew up enjoying art and loving art, and were inspired by an art teacher in your youth to go into art as a career. For those parents out there right now that have kids that are really interested in art and have taken that up as a passion of theirs and maybe considering it as a career, what advice do you have for them on what their kids can do and what the parents can do too to inspire their kids and prepare them for a career potentially as an artist?
Great question. The first thing I want to say is if you notice that your kid is creative or maybe doesn't think like everybody else around them, a lot of creative people think differently, they have different points of view, encourage it. Encourage it so much. And art is a viable career. I'd love to get rid of the old and not true idea of the starving artist. It's not true. We have a world right now that's so visual. Everything, people are on screens. There's videos, there's art, there's music, there's dance, all these different creative art forms. They're hot, and you can have a great career in it. And I would like to encourage parents to think that way, because as an art teacher, I know that some parents were out of love and concern for their kids. Well, they wanted to have something more practical to go into rather than art. And I would say encourage your kid. If they have passion, oh, that's the best thing. If you can have a career in something that you love, you are a lucky person. And I would encourage people to look in their communities. So they're maybe even ask if you have an art teacher or teachers at the school, who's in the community that's teaching art. And even if you can't do that or you can't afford to do that, create a corner in the kitchen where your child can sit down and get a little messy and play. And you don't even have to buy expensive materials. Literally, you could take the leftover water from coffee and use that with a brush and paint with that. You can take the charcoal that's left over from if you had a fire in the backyard, not a real, but a fire, cooking marshmallows or something. The leftover charcoal is a medium that people have used as an art tool for thousands of years. So there's things around you that you can use and just encourage them. And of course, there are after-school activities and programs. So look them up. That's what my mom did, and I was so grateful for that. I was involved in some after-school art programs, and I loved it. It was my favorite part of the day, and really encouraged me to become an artist. And those art teachers out there, God bless you. You're helping people find real viable careers and something exciting.
You're listening to your radio homes for the Megacast, 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake and 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. We're joined by Michelle Sider, a mixed media mosaic artist, joining us on the Oakland County Megacast. Her art on display among the art of 51 other glass artists at the Janice Carrick Gallery in West Bloomfield Township, now through May 18th. Janice Carrick Gallery is on the campus of the Jewish Community Center, located on Drake Road in West Bloomfield. More information on their website, gallery.jccdet.org. That's gallery.jccdet.org. Michelle, in 2017, you and Rabbi Joseph Krakoff published a book called Never Enough Time, aimed at helping children grieving with the loss of a loved one. Can you talk about that particular book? What went into your collaboration with the rabbi, and what was kind of the story behind initiating the production of this book?
Thank you for asking. The book is called Never Long Enough, and it is actually a beautiful book that helps people deal with the loss of a loved one or the grieving process. And we both came to it from different points of view, and it's a beautiful collaboration. And just in a wider sense, I want to say that while my partner is a rabbi and I'm also Jewish, that this book is not a Jewish book. It's not a religious book at all. It cuts across race, religion, sexual orientation, anything that we could use to divide ourselves in society. This cuts across all of it. It deals with loving somebody, and if you are losing somebody or lost somebody, the pain and the grief involved, and that cuts across all social class and everything. And it's a beautiful book that basically is prose, a poem broken down to different ideas, and each page has an original drawing or painting that slows you down and takes you through some different ideas to help you really honor the grieving process, to help you then move forward. And it's not a how-to book. It's actually just a really beautiful book that's very, I feel like it's very sensitively done. We took 3 years to create it and thought very carefully about every single detail that went into it. And people can go through slowly and with loved ones to read the different beautiful ideas in the book. And it starts out black and white, and it ends up in full color paintings, to the idea of going through the grieving process and then to hope at the end. The way it first started was Rabbi Krakoff was looking for somebody to illustrate some of his poetry. He's very talented and has a number of poems. I read his poem. He came to me and I read his poems, and this one poem in particular really struck me for a lot of different reasons. It was beautiful. I said, oh my goodness, we have to do something with this poem. So it was basically this one beautiful poem about loss that we focused on and then rewrote and created into a book. And at the end of the book, we have empty pages for people to write down their feelings. And feedback that we've gotten from people is that they've really used it almost as a journal or as a diary to talk about their loved ones and their relationship. And we actually created a sequel, which is a coloring book / workbook around the same poem, the same ideas, but we've expanded it, and we have some prompt questions, more blank pages, but it's also a coloring book so that a caregiver and somebody who's ill or family members after someone who has died can come together and color and talk about their loved ones, write down their ideas, and it really becomes a very valuable way to for the grieving process and to really honor your loved one.
Michelle, before we let you go, if people would like to obtain a copy of Never Long Enough or see any of your other work, where can they find you online, on your website and on social media?
Thanks for asking. So I do have a website. It's my name, Michelle, Michelle, studio.com. So it's michellesstudio.com is where you can see my work. And the book has its own website. It's called neverlongenough.net. So you can purchase books straight from the website there. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. My name is Michelle Cider, with like apple cider, but with an S. You can find my work online.
More information about the 4th Michigan Regional Glass Exhibition, which is going on now through May 18th, and features Michelle's works at the Janice Carrick Gallery in West Bloomfield Township on their website, gallery.jccdet.org. You can learn more about Michelle by visiting her website, michellesstudio.com, and learn more and obtain Never Long Enough by visiting neverlongenough.net. Michelle, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
To Sophia and Gabriel. Even though these old knees can't follow on your adventure to the forest today, these flowers represent my love. These stitches and threads join us together. And wherever you see a flower, a bird, a beautiful tree, know that my love is with you.
Make the forest part of your story at a park near you. Find one at discovertheforest.org.
72.7% of high school students get less than the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. This can cause pain, obesity, and can very negatively affect your mental health. When you have a consistent 7 to 9 hours of sleep every day, you get sick less often, lose more weight, and have better relationships with those around you. For more information about the dangers of sleep deprivation, go to sleepfoundation.org. This message is brought to you by the WBHS Digital Media Arts Program and 89.3 Lakes FM.
Can I ask you a question? Why did you get your kids vaccinated?
It was hard for them to social distance, to be isolated from their friends.
I want them to get back to school and sports games. So as a pediatrician, I recommend the vaccine to everyone I know.
The boys lost a former teammate and classmate who was only 20 years old. It's been a devastating year.
We want to get back to normalcy. Our daughter is really looking forward to being with her friends, being a kid.
Welcome back to the Michigan Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe. Learn more about the program by visiting our website at civiccentertv.com and clicking on our Megacast link or typing in civiccentertv.com/Megacast, where you'll learn more information about all of our partnering television, radio, and web outlets such as My Michigan TV, and find all of our episodes and each individual interview on demand. civiccentertv.com/Megacast. Joining us now is Cass Fry, the co-founder of Detroit CHEMpreneurIST, a shared Detroit-supported charity and nonprofit with us on the Michigan Megacast. Cass, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Appreciate having you on. So first off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to co-found this organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, my name is Cass Fry, and I'm a chemist and an entrepreneur, as well as a co-founder, board member, and the personal care chemistry instructor of Detroit CHEMpreneurIST. So I received my degree in chemistry and biological science from Wayne State University. And from there, I've worked in the cosmetic and pharmaceutical industry for nearly a decade. And I've always had a passion for learning and sharing my knowledge. And that's really what led me to co-found Detroit CHEMpreneurIST.
And so let's talk about the name of the organization, Detroit CHEMpreneurIST. What is the goal of this organization? I'm getting it's chemistry, it's a little bit about entrepreneurship. What ultimately is your organization hoping to accomplish out in the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a little bit of a play on words. As you can see, we can pull out the chemist and the entrepreneur. So our program focuses teaching students chemistry and entrepreneurship. So we utilize those two main topics to come up with our name. We are based in Detroit, so we included the Detroit, but one day we hope to have CHEMpreneurIST all over the country and all over the world. We formed in November of 2020, and we are a 501(c) nonprofit organization. I'm a co-founder. We also have another co-founder, Brittany Mitchell-Kelly. And the reason that we kind of came together and formed this organization is we both noticed different problems in our industry. In my industry, I was noticing a significant lack of diversity. Not only were women underrepresented in the cosmetic and personal care industry, but also Black, Indigenous, and people of color were underrepresented in the industry. And I found that these business owners who were selling cosmetic and personal care products to consumers did not look like the people who were buying those products. Brittany is an educator and a social worker, and so she's been in the teaching in the schools for almost a decade as well. And one of the things that she noticed is overall in schools, there is a focus on standardized testing. So a lot of the science and different programs get pushed to the side, especially around the time of the test and getting prepared for the test and making sure that students can study and are prepared for those exams. And so in 2014, Brittany and some of my other fellow educator friends started to bring me into their classrooms to speak to the students about what I was doing. And from there, that kind of just spiraled into eventually creating this organization after going into these classrooms and seeing the impact that we were having with the students and the interest they had in this topic that they didn't even know existed, and they look at the personal care products or the cosmetic products that they use every day. They never think that a chemist has to develop this product or a graphic designer has to design this container. And so through that and those interactions, we really formed Detroit CHEMpreneurIST. And our overall goal is to expose students through an after-school and summer program to personal care chemistry and entrepreneurship, with the idea that not only could they be a chemist one day, but they could be an entrepreneur and start their own business. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to create these cosmetic products. A lot of the entrepreneurial skill sets that we teach are applicable throughout all of life.
More information on their website, DetroitChempreneurIST.org. That's DetroitChempreneurIST.org, or by visiting ShareDetroit.org, where they are listed as one of nearly 300 charities and nonprofits in the Detroit area supported on the Shared Detroit platform. And so, as you're going into these classrooms, as your organization is interacting with these kids and attempting to inspire an interest in science, an interest in entrepreneurship, combining those two interests together, even in some senses, with today's kids and all the distractions in their classrooms and all the difficulties that are associated with modern day education. Do you find that it's still something that kids can get really interested in really quickly when you're applying some of these real world concepts to the science that they're learning in school each and every day?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that we see is kids are really interested in making their own money. They're already starting to think about, what am I going to do when I'm older? And they want to buy things like toys and candy and all of those great things. So really being able to say, hey, you can have your own business and you don't have to wait to do it. You can start it right now in middle school or high school. And it doesn't, like you said, have to be a science business. It could be walking dogs, right? It could be selling snacks and things like that. But starting to learn about how to do market research, how to pitch your business, how to focus on different investment opportunities out there and what does that look like. And then also with the chemistry side of things, being able to make a product that you can use yourself. So I made my own body scrub, or I made bath bombs for my family and friends. Kids get really excited and interested in that.
We're joined by Cass Fry there, the co-founder of Detroit CHEMpreneurIST, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. More information on the organization by visiting their website, DetroitChempreneurIST.org. That's DetroitChempreneurIST.org, or by visiting ShareDetroit.org and searching under their charities and nonprofits listing for Detroit CHEMpreneurIST. That is Detroit CHEMpreneurIST. And so, you mentioned multiple times personal care chemistry. Can you define that for us and how that is applied out in the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. I often hear, that's one of the big questions, what is personal care chemistry? A lot of people think they haven't heard of it. We're really talking about those personal care products and those cosmetic products. And so the science behind those products, what are the different properties that those products have? How are those properties applicable to your skin and to using them on your body? And as well as the properties behind the individual ingredients. And so once students can understand the different ingredients, they're able to actually formulate products utilizing those properties and those ingredients.
We're joined by Cass Fry there, the co-founder of Detroit CHEMpreneurIST, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. And so you mentioned that there are summer programs through Detroit CHEMpreneurIST, and that your organization also goes into classrooms throughout the year. If educators would like to get involved with Detroit CHEMpreneurIST and get them into their classrooms, or potentially engage their students in their summer programs, how can they go about doing so?
Yeah, so they can head to our website, www.detroitchempreneurist.org. We do have a contact submission form, so they can complete that information and send it over to us, and we would, reach back out to them and connect. You can also email us at info@detroitchempreneurist.org, and we can connect that way as well.
It's info@DetroitChempreneurIST.org. We're joined by Cass Fry, co-founder of Detroit CHEMpreneurIST, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. More information on their website, DetroitChempreneurIST.org, and by visiting ShareDetroit.org, where they are one of nearly 300 charities and nonprofits supported by the Share Detroit platform, currently at 291 charities and nonprofits supported at this time. And so there are a number of different ways beyond just getting your classrooms involved or getting your children involved with Detroit CHEMpreneurIST that the community can help support this effort and support STEM and STEAM programs in their community. What are some ways that those in the community that would like to help your organization continue its message and continue its impact on the community, for them to be able to participate themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple of things going on right now. We are hosting a cell phone fundraiser that is going on until August 7th. We are collecting used cell phones. The only requirement is it must have a battery. So if you have a BlackBerry or a Razor laying around, from 10 years ago, or maybe you just got the latest iPhone and you're not sure what to do with that recent version, we are accepting those. Those cell phones will be utilized. We'll be returning them to a recycling center to receive funds for scholarships. We are hosting a back-to-school scholarship event in the fall, and it'll be a competition with arts, science, and pitch categories. Students will be able to compete for those scholarships through all the cell phone funds that we collect. We also actively are accepting donations. We utilize DonorBox, PayPal, Facebook Charity. If you're not interested in donating cash, we do have an Amazon wish list available. You could also add us as an Amazon Smile charity. So if you're actively purchasing on Amazon, you can use smile.amazon.com and select us as your charity. We also are looking for volunteers within our program, so not just monetary. We actively are seeking guest speakers, so we bring in different STEAM professionals to our programs to speak to the students. We also host a webinar series every second Saturday. We started it in February of this year, and it goes all the way through December. So the second Saturday from 12 to 1:30 Eastern Standard Time, we have different web series. You can tune in. Some of the previous topics we've done were Black women in entrepreneurship. We did disability employment resources and awareness, as well as women in STEAM. And some of the upcoming events that we have are related to mental health awareness, as well as LGBTQ plus individuals in STEAM. And then other things that you could do is simply volunteering. So if you would like to volunteer in some of our workshops, volunteer and work with our students and share some of your knowledge and information, we would love that as well.
More information on their website, DetroitChempreneurIST.org. You can also send them an email at info@DetroitChempreneurIST.org, or call them 313-536-0714. That's 313-536-0714. And Cass, before we let you go, just for reference for the summer programs, but also for those educators that either later on in the school year, as it approaches its end this year, or next school year, would like to have Detroit CHEMpreneurIST be in their classroom. Can you take us through briefly just the experience of that day or that opportunity, and what the kids will experience and learn in that day?
Yeah, absolutely. So our program is very dynamic, and in that sense, we meet the organization where they are. So they can sign up from anywhere from 2 lessons, so that's simply 1 personal care chemistry lesson and 1 entrepreneurship lesson, all the way up to 8 lessons on each subject. We offer these lessons, we can do them in a half hour, we can do them up to 2-hour lessons. So depending on how much content you want to get and how in-depth you want to get with the curriculum, we have flexibility. We've done things once a week, twice a week. So really, it's all up to the organization and what their schedule looks like and what their individual needs are. Now, within the program, the more lessons an organization signs up with, the more, again, in-depth that content is. So on the personal care chemistry side of things, you're going to get an introduction into personal care chemistry. You're going to get an introduction into formulation and mixing instructions. We do activities like make body scrubs for that, so students can have something tangible. From there, we continue to learn about different properties of those products. So we do a lesson on pH, we do a lesson on mixtures and solutions and all of the different types of mixtures and categories of mixtures out there. Then we continue on, we learn about extraction and concentration, where we make a natural dye, and we actually utilize that dye in our next lesson to make a bath bomb. And then finally, we conclude our programming in chemistry by starting to design and develop our own personal care products. So whether that's inspired by a product that you use, or maybe it's a whole new product that's not on the market that you've created, students have that opportunity. On the flip side, in entrepreneurship, we're going to learn about different types of businesses that you can form. We're going to learn about how to do market research. We're going to talk about empathy and how important that is as being an entrepreneur. And then from there, we're going to continue to develop and grow these skill sets of entrepreneurs all the way through a business model canvas and pitching our products or our business idea to stakeholders and investors.
Cass, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me today. And I do want to give a shout out to Share Detroit for the opportunity as well to be here.
Thank you. More information on their website, DetroitChempreneurIST.org. That's DetroitChempreneurIST.org. Or by visiting sharedetroit.org and searching in their charities and nonprofits catalog on their website with Detroit CHEMpreneurIST and 290 other charities and nonprofits in the Metro Detroit area. That is going to do it for this Tuesday edition of the Oakland County and Michigan Megacast. I'd like to thank everybody that joined us on today's edition of the program. Dr. Russell Faust, the Chief Medical Officer over at the Oakland County Health Division. Dewey Steffen, CEO and Chief Investment Officer at Great Lakes Wealth, for joining us in the Oakland County Hour of the Megacast. In the Michigan Megacast Hour, the Reverend Dr. Patricia Coleman Burns from the University of Michigan, Michelle Sider, a mixed media artist, and of course, Cass Fry, the co-founder of Detroit CHEMpreneurIST. You can find all of these interviews on demand mid to late afternoon today on our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast, where you can also find our full episodes if you're just tuning in and you want the full 2-hour Megacast experience, or if you want to learn more about all of our partnering television and radio stations from communities all throughout the state of Michigan, and web streaming with services such as My Michigan TV, otherwise known as My. Highly encourage you also to go to our coronavirus page for up-to-date information on COVID-19 from the CDC, the NDHHS, and the Oakland County Health Division, with links at the very top of that page. Big thank you to our crew that makes this program possible each and every day. Our technical director, Calvin Brown, with me each and every day for the full 2-hour marathon that is the Megacast. Jared Clark, our Zoom producer out at the office of My Michigan TV. The king of television, Larry Nyland, our producer, getting all of our guests booked and helping both them and us prepare for every single one of these conversations that we have on the program. And of course, Maddie Mustian out at Master Control, helping us on and off the air. On My Michigan TV, Steve Leto Live is next, followed by Larry and Maddie Live. We'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m.